Welcome to the Hit Factor. We're Jemmy and Nye exploring a new blog post by Mr. Len Kaplan, CEO of CDML, a managed service provider in Queens, NY, offering network management, voice over IP, and unified communication as a service, or UCANA.
And that's not all. They also handle cybersecurity, compliance, infrastructure as a service, cloud solutions, and Microsoft 365 and Azure solutions.
That is quite the list. So if you're a small business owner or manage IT for a growing organization, this deep dive is definitely for you.
It really is, because today's topic is urgent. We're tearing into the CDML blog post. When geopolitics hits the keyboard, why critical infrastructure and its trusted advisors are under cyber attack.
And that title, it sounds huge. It sounds like something for the nightly news, miles away from your actual office.
Exactly. And our mission today is to cut through that noise.
We want to show you, the business owner, how these global conflicts translate into immediate local risks to your bottom line and your compliance.
It sounds complex, I know, but the defensive steps are they're surprisingly achievable.
So let's start with the big picture. When we hear cyber warfare, we're thinking of, major attacks on power plants, things like that.
And that's true. The source material confirms that critical infrastructure, energy, healthcare, transport is the primary target.
And these attacks come from groups tied to nation states, sponsored, condoned, that sort of thing.
Right, or they act as proxy hacktivist collectives. But here's the counterintuitive part the article points out. These attacks are often not using some bleeding-edge, sophisticated zero-day exploit.
So it's not a secret digital weapon they've spent millions developing?
Not usually, no. It reflects a major shift in cyber conflict. Why burn an expensive one-time use tool when you don't have to?
So what are they using instead?
Often it's just basic failures. Systems exposed to the internet, weak credentials, exploiting trusted relationships. They're just checking to see if you left the keys under the mat.
Which brings up the question of who is actually behind the keyboard. You mentioned hacktivists.
Yeah, and the line between a true hacktivist and a state-sponsored operator is functionally blurred. These state-aligned groups love the deniability it gives them.
But how can we tell they're state-aligned if they're hiding their tracks so well?
Well, the blog post lays out some really clear patterns. First, their operations line up almost perfectly with real-world geopolitical events. Tensions flare somewhere, and suddenly, the keyboards start clicking.
Okay, that's one sign. What else?
Second, and this is a big one, they almost never target infrastructure in their own home country.
That's a huge red flag. A real activist would probably go after their own government if they disagreed with them.
Exactly. And third, their goal isn't always a quick smash and grab. They're focused on long-term access, reconnaissance, basically setting up a digital forward operating base inside a network.
And they do this quietly.
For months, sometimes years.
Yeah.
And the last piece is the tool set. They use public, well-known tools and vulnerabilities. It makes it really hard to prove who the carpenter was if everyone is using the same hammer.
So from a business owner's perspective, it doesn't really matter what the group's name is. It's the impact that counts.
That's the bottom line. Whether it's espionage or disruption, the result for you is data theft and potentially catastrophic compliance failure.
Which means that old assumption that you're safe if you're not a giant utility company, that's just not true anymore.
It's dangerously outdated, and this is where the conversation gets really critical for our audience.
Right, because most of them are small or mid-sized professional service firms. The source calls this the strategic target shift.
Yes, critical infrastructure doesn't exist in a vacuum. A hospital or an energy company, they rely on a whole web of professional service providers.
And that web is the new target.
It's the perfect Trojan horse. Why attack the heavily armored fortress when you can just compromise the trusted supply vehicle that gets waved right through the gate?
So if I'm a law firm, a CPA firm, a medical practice, I'm now a target.
You're a strategic, indirect target.
Yeah.
You become the pivot point that lets an attacker bypass the big client's much stronger defenses.
Okay, let's drill down on that. Say I run a small accounting firm. Why would a nation-state actor spend any time on my network?
They get 4 huge advantages. First one, confidential documents. We're not just talking tax returns. We mean contracts, internal audits, M&A plans, information that gives them deep insight into a company's or even a country's economic vulnerabilities.
So that's pure intelligence gathering.
Absolutely. The second advantage is, I think, the most insidious, trusted email relationships. If they compromise your email as the trusted advisor,
Any request they send to the big client will be opened without a second thought.
immediately. An email from your lawyer or auditor asking for a sensitive file. It bypasses all the normal suspicion filters. They're literally weaponizing your trust.
And the third advantage.
Remote access paths. You probably have legitimate access into your client's environment for support or management. If they compromise you, they get a direct, quiet highway into the client's network.
So they've stolen the keys to the kingdom without ever having to fight the guards at the gate.
And the fourth advantage is sort of the flip side of all this. Your security is generally weaker. A small firm just doesn't have the budget or staff of a Fortune 500 company. You are the softest target leading to the hardest prize.
When you lay it out like that, it feels pretty daunting, almost like a fight you can't win.
It is a high-stakes scenario, you're right. But the good news is, their strategy also gives us the blueprint for our defense.
Let's talk about what these attacks actually look like. The blog post says they're not your typical smash and grab.
No, they're patient. A compromised law firm's email might be used to request a subtle change to a major vendor payment, or to get a copy of some intellectual property.
So the goal isn't a few $1,000s, it's about disrupting operations or intelligence.
Exactly. For a CPA firm, they're hunting for financial disclosures, audit materials. Getting access to a major company's balance sheet gives a nation-state incredible leverage.
And with medical practices, it's about identity data, not just credit cards, but workforce information that can be used in later attacks.
That's the core of it. They want credentials, and they want to maintain that quiet, long-term access. And this leads us right into the regulatory environment, which is finally catching up to this risk.
Right, the regulatory why. Why should my small firm worry about a giant hospital's compliance fines?
Because regulators now see third-party risk as systemic risk. If your non-compliance causes a breach for a regulated client, you share the liability. Your security posture directly affects their legal standing.
Can you give us some specific examples?
Sure. Let's start with healthcare. You have the Health Insurance Portability and Accountability Act, or IPA. It demands strict protection of protected health information, PHI. If you're a business associate who touches that data,
Like an IT provider or a billing service.
you have to meet those IPA safeguard requirements. Otherwise, you're making your client non-compliant. The obligation follows the data.
Okay, and for finance?
You've got the Gramm-Leach-Bliley Act, or GLBA. It mandates security for consumer financial data. If a bank shares data with an accountant, that bank has to ensure the accountant's security is up to GLBA standards.
What about here in New York?
New York's actually ahead of the curve with NYDFS 23, NYCRR 500. It's a powerful cybersecurity regulation that explicitly requires companies to oversee the security of their vendors. If you serve as a regulated New York entity, your security is under a microscope.
So it all comes down to this. If you serve regulated clients, your security has to match their level of risk.
It absolutely does.
So let's pivot back to the good news. How does a small business owner fight back without a nation-state-sized budget?
That's the key point in the article. You don't need a massive budget because you're targeting their common, simple techniques. The countermeasures are effective and very achievable.
So step one, where do we start?
Focus number one, audit and minimize your internet-facing systems. Every remote access portal, every old admin interface. It's a potential door in. If they can't see the door, they can't knock on it.
And what about credential theft? You said that was a primary goal.
That's priority number two. Enforce strong, phishing-resistant multi-factor authentication, MFA, everywhere. Email, VPNs, cloud platforms. It just neutralizes the vast majority of password theft attempts.
Okay, that makes sense. What's number three?
This one is about internal hygiene. Eliminate shared credentials and overprivileged access. No more admin123 password that the whole department uses. Give people access only to what they absolutely need to do their job.
That's the principle of least privilege and priority four.
Segment your network. You need internal walls. If an attacker breaches, say, a marketing server, you have to make sure that breach can't just pivot over to your sensitive client data. It limits the blast radius.
Smart. Now, what about ongoing maintenance? That's always tough.
Priority 5 is about focus. Aggressively patch your edge devices and identity infrastructure. That's your firewalls, VPNs, domain controllers. These are the systems talking to the outside world, and they're the primary targets. They have to be pristine.
And how do we spot these attackers if they're trying to be so quiet?
That's priority 6. Centralize your logging and actually monitor for abnormal access. An employee logging in from a strange country at 3 a.m.? That's a huge flag. Central logging helps you spot that before it escalates.
And finally, we have to prepare for the worst case scenario.
Priority 7, yes. Maintain and test an incident response plan. And it has to specifically include your client notification obligations under laws like HIPAA or GLBA. Knowing who to call and what to do turns a catastrophe into a manageable crisis.
That's a really clear, achievable defensive strategy.
And it directly counters the methods these groups are using. It turns a firm from the soft underbelly into a resilient, hardened partner.
So, wrapping this all up, what does this mean for you, our listener? Geopolitical cyber activity isn't some abstract threat anymore. It's a real, ongoing condition.
And it affects you. Your law firm, your CPA practice, your healthcare business, you are now a strategic part of this conflict. Treating cybersecurity as just an IT issue is over. It's a core part of professional responsibility.
It's about reducing your exposure and aligning your security with those high regulatory expectations.
Exactly.
If you like this deep dive, please click the thumbs up button. We release new blog posts and therefore new deep dives every Tuesday and Thursday, giving you that shortcut to staying well informed.
And we invite you to visit https.cdml.com and subscribe to their blog to stay safe, stay informed, and stay compliant.
Till next time.